Hi everybody and welcome to another MuseMachine video here on our ComfyUI playlist. And today we are going to take a look into the basic workflows of ComfyUI, the very first ComfyUI image generation workflow. And no, today we are not going to have a look into today is October. We are not going to take a look into the October 2025 most recent fancy models. This is for something else, for another video. We take today a look at the most basic or first release model that actually released this hype. It's about Stable Diffusion 1.5. Now, if you say, hey, Stable Diffusion 1.5 is kind of old, I know this model, I'm not really interested into generating images with it. For videos, we have also another video for that in the future. Bear with me though, because we are going to talk about the technical stuff. Yeah, even if you are a creative, even if you are a product designer, an architect, or what have you, the question is, why should you understand the nodes, how they work? Well, the idea is basically that although you do not really need 100% to understand what's going on, it's always good to know what the components do to really master ComfyUI, and also to understand if you have any errors, what are the actual reasons for that? Yeah, why are certain errors appearing? Why are certain connections between the nodes in a certain color? What does it really mean? As I said last time, it's like controlling your car. If you want to drive a car, right, like on the streets with your driver license out there, well, you can use Nano Banana, you can use all the features or models you have already in the cloud. But if you want to drive like a Formula One car, you also have to understand the car a little bit more properly. And that's why we will take a small technical look into ComfyUI and also how images are being generated. So without further ado, let's go and let's dive into ComfyUI. Last time I showed you already how to install ComfyUI. So if you don't know, there is a link in the description or also here at the end of the video. Don't worry about that. I now assume that you have already everything installed. So this is like ComfyUI, our general basic thing. And I would suggest that we start with a, let's say, blank canvas. Of course, there are like a lot of templates here and also like the image generation, which shows the most basic workflow. It will load the workflow we will see in a moment, but I would suggest let's do it step by step so that we understand what's really happening in the background. The very first thing that we need is a checkpoint model. So we make a double click on the canvas and we search for load checkpoint. We have here the node, the previews on the left-hand side, and we click on it. I already downloaded the model, so if you do not have the model, you can go, for example, to templates at the end of the video. So if you are through it, click here on templates, click on image generation, an error will spawn and you can automatically download it. Otherwise, you can also go here to the upper right to manager, and then you can go to the model manager here in the center. You click on it and then you have a lot of different models here. And what we want to have is Stable Diffusion 1.5. So we simply search for 1.5 and then we search for the base model that we need. And it's in this case, the V15 pruned IMA only CKPT. So that's everything we really need for today's session. So this is like the very first base model that is actually still being used and people still use it for their costume training. So it's kind of old, but it still works. Now we see 3 points that leave the model: model, clip, and VAE. What are these things? Now, actually, Stable Diffusion is like, or people say, yeah, there is like an AI model behind it, also like the large language models and so on, but the truth is more complex. These models, they consist of different models entangled together to create a larger construct, let's say, and Stable Diffusion is no different. We have like 3 points or 3 submodels, let's say, that create at the end our workflow. What we will do, we will first start with the clip part. Now, clip is like the thing, has been is a model trained by OpenAI in 2021 that combines images with text descriptions. Yeah, so this is that's the only thing you need to know. Yeah, so for example, a cat laying in the grass, the image corresponds to a prompt. So we have something mathematically that understands if I write something, what kind of image do I expect, and vice versa. So we take the clip here, we make a left click, we point it somewhere here, and then it immediately suggests what kind of clip related nodes I would like to have. And the very first thing is the one we need, the clip, text, and code. It's like, yeah, the prompt we want to use. So this is like the prompt. This is something where we can write, for example, a meadow during the sunset or something like that in a photorealistic setting. Yeah, photorealistic, realistic. Stable Diffusion 1.5 requires a lot of prompt engineering, as you know this wording maybe from LinkedIn and also other internet sources or some blogs. The more recent models, they do not require this kind of prompt engineering and fancy prompting where you have a lot of different words attached to the thing you would like to describe. Stable Diffusion 1.5 is kind of, yeah, I would say cumbersome to work with. And also the results today, they will not really be perfect, but let's stick with this solution. We can set also another prompt here, which will be our negative prompt. So something we want to avoid, yeah? And also this sounds a little bit like dark magic, but for Stable Diffusion 1.5, it worked kind of good to write something like bad quality or even something like JPEG artifacts. Well, again, today, some models, they don't even have the option to provide you negative prompts, but in our case, we have these two prompts. So what we have is at the end, some kind of mathematical representation that will be fed into something called a sampler. So we put here the conditioning and we get the KSampler, the very first one here. And the KSampler looks a little bit intimidating, but what does it do? It is like in the image generation process, like the drawer. It draws everything based on the input, based on the prompt, the negative prompt, the model, and also different settings we will go through here in a moment. We have here the positive prompt. You see the yellow ones are all, let's say, text related, yeah, and also here the negative one. Now we need to connect also the model, yeah, the diffusion model, and we are almost there. What we need now is we need something that is called latent image. Now, what is a latent image? First, we can also draw back here in ComfyUI, which is also very nice. So we go from the right to the left, and it suggests us what do we want. And in our case, we want to have the empty latent image. Now, the empty latent image is like the image you want to draw and what kind of resolution. In our case, it's like very simple 512 times 512 pixels. The batch size indicates how many images you would like to draw. Let's stick it with one. The thing is now that the latent image is something that it's like a very noisy image, let's say. And what Stable Diffusion does, it tries to take a noisy image and extract the information you are asking for. Like, for example, a meadow during the sunset. So imagine it like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. You pour some milk in there and you make a vortex and everything becomes like, yeah, a milk cafe. Now, if you want to extract the milk out of the coffee, well, what could you do? There's like literally no way to extract it, only by reversing, for example, the time, which may sound stupid. So if you record a video and then you see how the drop is being removed from the coffee. And I don't want to say it's something like this happens here, but let's say something like this happens here. So we try to extract information from our big coffee pool. Why is it called latent image? The thing is that, so you also see here something latent is being drawn. The thing is that Stable Diffusion is not creating an image. So it's not an image creation process for 512 times 512 pixels with 3 channels RGB. it is creating something on a way smaller space, way smaller. Yeah, it's something that's not really, let's say, resembles an image. The thing is, we have a third component at the end that decodes what is being created into an image. So you have to imagine it like we do not draw an image, we image a zipped version, a compressed version of the image. We need to decompress afterwards. You may ask, why all the stress? Why not making the image from scratch? The thing is that, for example, also with computer hardware, with the consumer hardware, it wouldn't be possible at all to do these things in 2K, 4K or so. Maybe on a cluster it works, of course, or with more fancier GPUs, but it has been shown that these methods are the most reliable to create images. So what we do here when we have our image creation process, we draw another line to the right. We have the VAE decoder. So our latent image is being decoded, decompressed with something called a variational autoencoder, which is the third part, the red thing from our model. If you're very interested in this very technical things and terms, we can also have another playlist with very deep or technical deep dives. Maybe it's something for the techies, I don't know. But here, let's stay and stick for us creators, let's say. So what we have at the end is an image that we can create or extract, and we can have a preview out of this, and we can also save it as well. So save image, and the images are saved later in a folder I will show you just in a moment. Everything is set, I would say, and what we can do is we simply click on the run button and we get our image. Now, as I told you, Stable Diffusion 1.5 is not that good. We can also rerun it. And there is another meadow. Now you see that each time we click on run, we get something else. And you see here the drawing process with the green bar on the left side. I can also go a little bit down here. This is the save image, this is the preview. Maybe I can even delete the preview and just stay with the save part. So what happens now is we can take a look at our sampler and try to understand the very first two settings, the seed and the control after generate. Now the seed is something you have to imagine like we want to extract the information from the noise. And noise is very, very random. So each time the noise looks different, the resulting image looks different. So the image here on the right side is based on a noise image. It looks a little bit different than from the image before. So the seed is like a number that controls the noise. It makes the noise reproducible. Yeah, you can reproduce the noise. So if I give you the seed and all the settings here, you could actually reproduce this image one by one. This is the reason, for example, why in Nano Banana or other tools you really get always different images, because you do not have this control of the seed. So what we can do here, we can control the seed either by writing down a number, or we can say, okay, we want to increment the number with every generation, or we have it fixed. Randomized is the default. Now we click on run and we get another one. If I press again run, nothing happens because I didn't change anything. It only reacts to changes. Now I changed here the setting to 1, and again, that's basically all. Let's go to the next part. We have here the steps. Here are like 20 steps. What does it mean? It means that we try to extract the information, the picture from our noisy ocean in 20 steps. So the drawer, the sampler, who is like, as I said, the drawer does this step 20 times, and each time it improves better and better. Now you could say, okay, with every step when it's improved, I could put it to 2000 or so. Well, there are like rule of thumbs, I would say, or blueprints that tell you for each model. So here it's Stable Diffusion 1.5. For each model, there are like different default settings you can play with. We can, for example, see what happens if I make it with 5. We will see that the information is way blurrier. We have less stuff to see. And that's what it does. With more steps, we get more details in our images. But the thing is also, if we have 50, then, well, at some point we have also like an information saturation. There's no new information being added. Yeah, there's like no changes between 50 and 60, for example. So we can stay with 50 here in this case. What is the CFG? Now the CFG, it says here, the classifier free guidance, don't worry about the wording. The CFG simply means how close should the draw be to the prompt that you just wrote. Now you may ask, that's kind of paradox. I wrote a prompt, I want the image as I wrote it, right? That's right, but for example, a meadow during the sunset, photorealistic, is a very big solution space. It could be anything in a lot of different colors. So it's not really like something it doesn't represent what you probably have in mind. If you write a very clear and long prompt and you have a CFG that's very, very high, it tries to draw something literally what you just wrote. The thing is though, a higher CFG leads to more prompt image coherence, but it will also lead to more artifacts. So there will be more issues regarding noise and stuff that looks a little bit uncanny. If you make the CFG lower, you have better results, but they're not so coherent to what you just wrote. Here it's a very generic prompt. We can, let's say, for example, go with 4 and see what happens. And we see it's maybe a little bit more photorealistic. It's still a meadow, it's okay. Again, in my case, it's perfect. This looks a little bit, well, it looks already like a bad iPhone image, which makes it even more realistic. But let's stay with 7, yeah. It's a fair result, but maybe a little bit oversaturated with colors. Now it will be a little bit complicated. The Euler and the sampler name and the scheduler. Now, the sampler name and the scheduler, they are like the ways how the information is being extracted. And this is like a scientific discipline. You see here a lot of stuff. Either you play with them or you try to go through the blueprints, and we will also provide blueprints in the future. The same thing also applies for the scheduler. I wouldn't go now in detail through all of them. I would suggest that you stick with the default settings that are in the templates, because it's really like a scientific discipline. Now, for Euler, we can have here the simple scheduler. We can, for example, try this exponential and see what happens with the same other settings. Well, in our case, really nothing happened, because some settings don't have a big impact on different models. So either you stay with the default settings or you try to play around. How to get different results or multiple images with different settings is something we will take a look in the future. The very last thing is the denoise. And the denoise is more important for in-painting and also other processes where we are handling images. In this case, it's not really necessary, because we will get bad results, because it tells you how much noise is being added to what we already have. Well, we don't have an input image, so if we make a small number, then the image will degenerate probably and will be gray or something. Yeah, it doesn't really look good. So here in our text to image case, there shouldn't be a other denoise value than 1. This is more for image to image stuff. So this is like the Stable Diffusion 1.5 basic workflow. And I think even in 3-4 years, Stable Diffusion 1.5 is still there as a good, let's say, hello world workflow in the world of GenAI. So this was our very first basic workflow in ComfyUI, where I tried to explain you the basic concept of the nodes and what the different colors mean. Don't worry if you didn't understand all at once. With the experience, you get a better feeling what does it mean to work with the clip and conditioning, with the empty Latin space, and so on. So all these things will probably prevail in the next, I would say, 2-3 years. So I hope this video will not be obsolete within the next weeks. However, different models work a little bit differently, but I would suggest not to make a introductory basic video for each model. I would say we will increase the pace a little bit and try to make also then longer videos, longer tutorials where we explain the things where you have to be working in parallel to learn something and apply it, for example, for your hobby project or your daily work. So to the next video, I would say we can already have a look at one of the most recent models, for example, that were released like 2-3 weeks ago. So in September 2025. We don't have to go really through all the different templates from ComfyUI. We can also test other workflows I find on the internet, create our own workflows, test some managers, some extensions and so on. And also leave a comment if you would like to see certain workflows for your needs. Then we can also upload them so that you can work with that. I hope you learned something in today's session. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Whoa, shame on me. I almost forgot to show you where the images are stored. So if you have the default installation of ComfyUI, you have it in documents/ComfyUI, and there in the folder output, we have all the images we just generated and also the ones from last time. Take a look at your creations and sometimes delete them, otherwise your hard disk will be full quite quickly.